They said television had its limits, that there were lines it would never cross. And then came Trilogy of Terror, a made-for-TV movie that didn't just cross the line, it obliterated it. In 1975, American households tuned in expecting the usual slow-burn thrills of network horror. What they got was something entirely different. A woman hunted in her own apartment by a snarling, razor-toothed doll with a tribal soul and a scream that pierced living rooms across the nation. Phones rang, complaints poured in. ABC was accused of broadcasting a nightmare, but the real story wasn't just the Zuni fetish doll. It was Karen Black, one actress, 3 roles, and a final performance so unhinged, it became a psychological watermark for televised horror. It was the camera angles tight, claustrophobic, almost too intimate. It was the fact that the terror felt too close, too possible. And decades later, people still remember the sound that thing made. Was it just a cheap puppet and clever lighting? Or something else, something they shouldn't have brought to set? Behind the latex and screams lies a tangled web of production tricks, unsolved accidents, superstitions, and whispered regrets. From last-minute script rewrites to props that mysteriously disappeared from ABC's vaults, Trilogy of Terror is more than a cult TV movie. It's a relic, one that still pulses with unease. So, if you thought you knew why this film haunted an entire generation, think again. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Trilogy of Terror. 1975. Let's go behind the fact. Fact 1. The doll that was never supposed to move. The original script called for the Zuni doll to remain motionless. It was just meant to be a symbol, a cursed object, nothing more. The terror would come from implication, not action. But on the first day of filming, director Dan Curtis took one look at the static prop and said, "That's not scary enough." What happened next changed TV horror forever. With almost no budget for special effects, the team improvised. They used fishing lines, point-of-view shots, and a man in a suit for brief moments. The most disturbing part? The puppet never quite moved like a puppet. It twitched, it lunged, it felt alive. Karen Black, who was already deeply immersed in character, began reacting in real time to the erratic movements, unscripted flinches, real screams. Some takes were kept precisely because of that authenticity. Audiences weren't prepared. They expected suspense. What they got was kinetic terror, sudden, erratic, almost feral. The Zuni doll wasn't just a prop anymore. It became something else, a presence. And to this day, no one can quite explain why the final cut made it seem like the thing had a soul. Fact 2. Karen Black tried to back out twice. She was the face of New Hollywood, enigmatic, intense, a little bit unhinged in the best way. Karen Black had worked with Robert Altman, Jack Nicholson, and Alfred Hitchcock. So when she read the script for Trilogy of Terror, she didn't say yes, she hesitated. In fact, she said no, twice. Black was uncomfortable with playing multiple roles in one film. It felt gimmicky, she said. Worse, the final story, Amelia, seemed too exploitative, a woman alone, mentally unraveling, chased by a tiny predator. But her then-husband, screenwriter Robert Burton, had a hand in the script, and he pushed. Eventually, Black relented on one condition. She wanted control over the wardrobe and mannerisms for each character. She wasn't going to play 3 versions of the same woman. She wanted 3 lives, 3 psyches, 3 breakdown. The result was haunting. Viewers didn't just see different women, they saw fractures of identity, of emotion, of control. Karen Black didn't just act in Trilogy of Terror, she disintegrated on screen. And in the years that followed, she admitted, that last role changed something in her, and she was never quite the same again. Fact 3. The phone call scene was based on a real panic attack. In Amelia, the moment comes early. The protagonist is alone in her apartment, holding the tribal doll, about to call her mother. She doesn't finish the sentence. Her hands tremble. The silence grows, and for a few seconds, the camera just holds, waiting. That scene wasn't in the script. On the day of filming, Karen Black reportedly had a moment of genuine panic. The room was hot. The doll had malfunctioned earlier, cutting her hand, and she was feeling trapped in a character that hit too close. The crew noticed. Dan Curtis noticed. But he didn't yell, "Cut." Instead, he quietly told the sound team, "Keep rolling." What we see on screen is not performance. It's a woman spiraling, her dialogue slurs, her breathing shortens, and when she finally drops the phone, it's not acting, it's her body shutting down from anxiety. They kept the take. They even built the scene around it, adding music after the fact, to heighten the tension. Viewers assumed it was just great acting, but when asked years later about that moment, Black didn't recall filming it at all. Which begs the question, where does the actress end and the haunted character begin? Fact 4. The Zuni fetish doll was lost for years. After the film aired in 1975, props were packed, archived, or discarded as usual. But the Zuni doll, the very object that traumatized a generation, was nowhere to be found. ABC's internal inventory showed it had been checked out for preservation, but no one remembered doing it. For years, rumors spread. Some said a collector had bribed a crew member. Others claimed the doll had simply walked off set. Conspiracy-minded fans pointed to the studio fire in 1980 as a cover-up, though no damage report ever listed the doll among the destroyed items. Then in 2005, it resurfaced. A private estate auction in California listed it as a carved tribal artifact from unknown TV production. A horror memorabilia blogger recognized it instantly. The mouth, the teeth, the spear, unmistakable. But something was off. The seller had no provenance, and the doll bore fresh scratches across its back, as if it had been recently moved, struggled with. ABC never claimed ownership, and today, the Zuni fetish doll remains in a glass case at a horror museum in Las Vegas under lock and key, just in case. Fact 5. Karen Black wrote the final monologue herself. The final scene in Amelia is unforgettable. A woman crouched on the floor, her mouth stretched into a snarl, waiting for her mother with a knife. The voice that emerges isn't hers. It's deeper, primal, animalistic. That wasn't in the script. Originally, the ending was supposed to be ambiguous. Amelia simply sits in silence, implying she has been overtaken by the doll's spirit. But Karen Black didn't think that was strong enough. "If I'm going to lose my mind," she told Dan Curtis, "I want the audience to hear it break." She rewrote the monologue the night before filming. The guttural voice, the twisted cadence, the hissed words, they were hers. The crew was stunned. The sound team had to re-record the dialogue because the first take was nearly unusable due to the genuine screams of a grip who hadn't been warned. When the episode aired, censors debated cutting the ending, but it stayed, and it became one of the most disturbing final shots in television history. Fact 6. The sound of the doll was made from pig screams. That high-pitched, frantic screech the Zuni doll makes, it's not human. The sound designer, Rick Hedrick, wanted something unnatural, something that would trigger the fight or flight response. He experimented with instruments, distorted human whispers, and animal growls. Nothing worked. Then, by accident, he played a sped-up tape of piglets being herded during a farm shoot for a different project. The mix of panic, breathlessness, and grating sharpness was unbearable. He slowed it down, layered it, added reverse reverb. The result was a howl that didn't quite belong to any species. Test audiences reacted instantly. Some covered their ears, others left the room. ABC executives reportedly asked if the sound could be softened. Dan Curtis refused, and here's the twist. Hedrick destroyed the original source tape. When asked why, he simply said, "That sound came from a real place, and I don't want to go back there." Fact 7. The studio got complaints from its own employees. The night Trilogy of Terror premiered, ABC's switchboard lit up. That wasn't surprising. What was shocking was who was calling. Not just angry parents or frightened viewers, but employees inside the network. Several internal staffers who previewed the episode during work hours reported disturbing physical reactions, headaches, nausea, palpitations. One assistant claimed she couldn't sleep for 3 nights after watching the Amelia segment. Another executive allegedly demanded the network pull future re-airings, stating, "This isn't horror. This is psychological warfare." The network held a closed-door meeting the following week to address the backlash. No public statement was made, but the decision was clear. Trilogy of Terror would never be rebroadcast in prime time again, only late-night slots. When asked about the complaints years later, a retired ABC exec simply said, "It was too effective. That was the problem." And in a twist of irony, this censorship only fueled its legend. Fact 8. The Zuni doll was based on a real relic that went missing. Screenwriter Richard Matheson claimed the Zuni doll was entirely fictional. But prop designers tell a different story. During pre-production, the art department was reportedly given reference photos of a small wooden figurine found in a museum collection, an artifact labeled Unattributed Tribal Object, East Africa. It had the same wide eyes, the same snarling teeth, the same posture of aggression. The production team used it as visual inspiration, but weeks later, when they tried to verify the source, it was gone. The museum had no record of the artifact, No photos, no digital catalog, nothing. It was as if the object had never existed. To this day, no one knows where that real doll went or if it ever left the museum at all. And some believe that was the curse, not the prop in the film, but what it was copying. Fact 9. One scene was cut because it looked too real. There was originally a fourth story planned for Trilogy of Terror, a segment involving a sleepwalking woman committing violence while possessed. It was written, storyboarded, and even partially filmed, but the studio pulled it after viewing the rough cut of one specific scene: a knife attack in a kitchen. The lighting was low, the camera handheld, and Karen Black's performance was so disoriented and physical that ABC censors feared it might inspire real violence. According to crew notes, one executive said, "She doesn't look like she's acting, she looks like she's gone." The footage was sealed and never aired. Some say it was destroyed. Others claim it exists in a vault somewhere locked away with other, unbroadcastable material from the era. And here's the eerie part. Karen Black refused to speak about it. Not once. Not in interviews. Not even in retrospectives. It's almost as if she wanted that fourth woman to disappear along with everything she became on set. Fact 10. The final shot wasn't in the script. The last image of Trilogy of Terror is iconic. Amelia crouched on the floor, grinning, clutching a butcher knife, and waiting for her mother to come home. Her teeth click, her eyes gleam. It's not just disturbing, it's wrong, in the best way. And it was never in the script. Originally, the film was to end with Amelia collapsing, the doll's spirit defeated. But on the final day of filming, Dan Curtis made a last-minute change. He told Karen Black to just let go. No script, no lines. Just instinct. What followed was pure improvisation. Karen dropped into that pose naturally, unblinking. She began to click her teeth, an idea she came up with on the spot. The entire crew stood silent. Even the cameraman didn't call cut. For over a minute, she just sat there, vibrating with malice. That raw, wordless ending made it into the final cut. And to this day, it's considered one of the most unsettling final shots in television history because it wasn't planned. It was conjured. Fact 11. A prop knife vanished from set. There were 3 rubber knives used during the filming of Amelia. 2 were accounted for by the end of production. The third disappeared. No one knows exactly when. One moment it was in the props department, the next gone. Security logs didn't show anyone taking it. No one remembered packing it. For years, it was dismissed as an oversight. Then, in 1993, a collector of horror memorabilia claimed to have purchased the original Trilogy of Terror knife at a private estate sale. It matched the dimensions, the dull edge, the handle wrapped in aging grip tape. When questioned, the seller offered no documentation, only a story, that it had been found in a box, under a bed, in a house where no one had lived for over a decade. ABC declined to investigate, and the prop now sits in a collector's vault, unlabeled, unverified, and, depending on who you ask, better left untouched. Fact 12. Karen Black said the doll visited her dreams. In a 1981 interview, Karen Black revealed something few expected. She had recurring dreams about the Zuni doll. Not nightmares, exactly, but vivid, disorienting visions. "It wasn't chasing me," she said. "It was just there watching, always standing in the corner of the room. And sometimes, it smiled." She brushed it off as residual stress from the role, but friends noted she spoke about it with real unease. One even claimed she brought it up during a dinner party and refused to sleep in a room with tribal artwork afterward. When Trilogy of Terror gained cult status in the 80 seconds and 90 seconds, fans began sending Karen replicas of the doll handmade, sculpted, even 3D printed. She never displayed them. Most were returned. Some were thrown away. In her final years, she was asked again about the dreams. She hesitated, then replied, "It stopped showing up, but I don't think it left." Which makes you wonder what happens when a role doesn't just stay with you, it waits for you. Fact 13. Dan Curtis used a real seance tape during filming. The mood on set was tense. Long hours, low budget, and the growing psychological weight of the Amelia segment were taking their toll. Director Dan Curtis wanted the fear to feel real, so he made an unusual request. He brought in a reel-to-reel tape of a real seance recorded during the production of the Norless tapes, another horror TV project he had worked on. One night, just before shooting a tense scene with Karen Black in the apartment set, he had the crew play the tape over the speakers, low volume, unintelligible chanting, eerie pauses, distant knocking. He didn't warn the cast. The energy shifted. Karen reportedly became visibly shaken. A grip left the room. One boom operator claimed the lights flickered, but no one else saw it. Curtis later confessed he wanted an invisible pressure on the scene. The tactic worked. The performance that night was raw, but when they reviewed the footage later, they noticed something strange. The audio had picked up whispers not from the tape, not from the crew. No one could explain them. And the recording? It was lost the next day. Fact 14. The doll was almost censored for being racially problematic. In the early stages of production, ABC executives raised concerns about the Zuni fetish doll's design. The exaggerated features, tribal necklace, and spear were seen by some as racially insensitive or perpetuating stereotypes. The network considered cutting the segment entirely. To keep it alive, the design team modified the doll's features, reducing the lips, changing the war paint patterns, and removing any identifiable ethnic markers. But the original sculpt, according to insiders, was far more aggressive, its expression even more savage. That version was never shown to the public, or so we thought. In 2010, leaked behind-the-scenes stills surfaced showing a different doll, more grotesque, with sharper features and more pronounced ornamentation. Horror forums lit up, some called it the banned prototype. Others questioned whether it was real. ABC never commented, and the original mold? Reportedly destroyed. But many believe one prototype still exists in private hands. Fact 15. The apartment set was reused and may have left something behind. The Amelia segment takes place almost entirely in a small, claustrophobic apartment. After filming, that set was recycled for multiple TV shows, common practice in the 1,970 seconds. It showed up in episodes of Columbo, Marcus Welby, MD, and even a sitcom pilot. But something strange kept happening. Crew members consistently reported equipment malfunctions when filming in that space. Lights would blow without warning. Audio lines would corrupt. A camera jammed so badly it had to be replaced. It became a quiet superstition. The Amelia set was bad luck. Years later, a new production team noticed something wedged between floorboards during a renovation. A tiny shard of carved wood, darkened by time, shaped like a jagged tooth. No one could say how it got there, but someone on set swore it matched the Zuni doll's missing molar broken during the original shoot. The piece was discarded, but those who were there say, for weeks afterward, the lights flickered just a bit more than usual. Fact 16. One scene triggered a viewer's psychotic episode. Shortly after the film's original airing on ABC, a local news station in Illinois reported an unusual incident. A woman had been hospitalized after allegedly attacking her television during the broadcast of Trilogy of Terror. The woman, in her mid-30 seconds, had no prior history of mental illness. According to neighbors, she was watching the film alone when they heard a crash, followed by screams. When emergency services arrived, they found her huddled in a corner, mumbling about something inside the walls. She had shattered the screen with a fire iron. The hospital report referred to the episode as a brief but intense psychotic break, seemingly triggered by audiovisual stress. The doctors didn't elaborate. ABC never responded publicly, but internal memos later revealed the network temporarily pulled the film from rerun consideration in that region. The segment she was watching? Amelia. Years later, a documentary about media and trauma referenced the incident as one of the earliest recorded cases of broadcast-induced delusion. And to this day, the footage from that segment is studied not just by film scholars, but by psychologists. Fact 17. The writer hated the most famous segment. Richard Matheson, the celebrated horror and sci-fi writer behind classics like I Am Legend and Duel, penned 2 of the 3 segments in Trilogy of Terror. But the third one, the one everyone remembers, he didn't write it, and he didn't like it. That third story, Amelia, was adapted by William F. Nolan from a short story Matheson had written years earlier. But the changes were drastic. The pacing, the tone, the focus on the doll, all of it diverged from Matheson's vision. He reportedly told friends he thought it was gimmicky, that it relied too much on shock, that it missed the tragedy at the heart of the original tale. Despite this, Amelia became the breakout segment. It overshadowed the other 2 stories entirely and cemented the film's cult status. Matheson never publicly condemned it, but in later interviews, when asked about Trilogy of Terror, he would only discuss the first 2 stories, almost as if the last one didn't count. Fact 18. The doll's eyes were modeled after a real killer. According to the prop department's notes, the Zuni doll's most unsettling feature, its wide, unblinking eyes, weren't random. They were modeled after a real person. During pre-production, the art director brought in a newspaper clipping from a 1,960 seconds criminal case. A man convicted of multiple violent crimes. In the courtroom photograph, his eyes were said to be glassy, unrelenting, almost inhuman. That photo was pinned to the workshop wall as a reference. The sculptor exaggerated the proportions, made the whites larger, and tilted the gaze slightly downward to create the feeling that the doll was always watching, always calculating. The final product was effective. Too effective. Karen Black reportedly refused to look directly into the doll's eyes between takes. One crew member said it gave him nightmares. Even Dan Curtis admitted, "It's not the teeth, it's the eyes. That's where the evil lives." The real question is, what kind of energy gets transferred when you carve evil into plastic? And what happens when that gaze doesn't forget you? Fact 19. The original broadcast was almost pulled last minute. Just days before Trilogy of Terror was set to air, ABC's Standards and Practices Division received a memo warning of psychologically harmful material. The note specifically referenced the Amelia segment and questioned whether it violated television guidelines for domestic psychological realism. In other words, it felt too real. Internal debate followed. Should they cut it, delay it, reshoot the ending? Time was running out. The broadcast date had already been announced in TV Guide, and Karen Black had done interviews promoting all three roles. Dan Curtis stood firm. He told executives, "This is horror for adults. You either grow with the audience or you get left behind." In the end, the film aired uncut. The backlash was immediate. ABC received hundreds of complaint letters, many of them describing the film as disturbing, traumatic, or too extreme for television. Some parents threatened to boycott sponsors. Others claimed it caused sleep disorders in their children. ABC never aired it during primetime again. And just like that, a film meant to showcase versatility became a whispered legend. Fact 20. Karen Black refused to watch it ever again. Despite her haunting performance and the accolades that followed, Karen Black never rewatched Trilogy of Terror. Not during its reruns, not during the VHS boom, not even during her own fan retrospectives. In interviews, she dodged questions about Amelia. She spoke at length about working with Dan Curtis, about the technical challenges of playing three roles, about horror as a form of catharsis. But the doll? The apartment? The final shot? Silence. A co-star once revealed that Black walked out of a screening room when the film started playing. "She told me she didn't need to see it," he said, "because it was still playing in here." He tapped his temple. Karen Black would go on to become a horror icon, but Trilogy of Terror remained her most enduring and most avoided work. Some roles define an actor, others consume them. Bonus fact: the doll still moves, just a little. In 2022, a film historian visited the Horror Museum in Las Vegas that houses the original Zuni fetish doll. It sat in a glass case, unmoving, under dim lights, surrounded by props from other cult classics. During a private tour, the curator shared a story. Late one night, after closing, the museum's motion sensors had gone off specifically in the corner where the doll was kept. Thinking it was an animal or a fault in the system, security checked the footage. The cameras showed nothing unusual until they slowed the tape down. In one frame, just one, the doll's spear had shifted slightly to the left. No one touched it, no vibration, no tremor, just a movement. Technicians blamed airflow or settling of the display case, but the historian looked closely. The dust under the doll's foot had cracked, as if pressure had shifted. When he looked up, he could swear the doll's eyes had changed, not open wider, just watching him differently. If you thought this was just another forgotten TV horror flick, think again. Which fact haunted you the most? The missing knife? The whispers in the audio? Or the doll that still moves nearly 50 years later? Tell us in the comments. Do you believe it was all clever filmmaking? Or something that slipped through from the other side? And while you're here, hit like, subscribe, and let us know, which film should we expose next? Because behind every scream, there's a fact waiting to be uncovered.